What is up, guys? It is the Bluebloods here, back with another SWAC recruiting update, and we got to go to Huntsville, man. Talk about what the Alabama A&M Bulldogs are doing, man. One of the deepest recruiting classes right now in the SWAC, man. They have hit a bunch of their needs already, and I mean the way they're rolling, you got to give Connell Maynor and that coaching staff a lot of credit for what they've been doing. Listen. Go check out our FAMU recruiting outlook. We released that last week. We got a bunch of interviews coming up. And on top of that, you can check out our Celebration Bowl recap that we recap all the craziness that happened this past Saturday in Atlanta. But let's start out here talking about what I thought were and are the biggest needs in this Alabama A&M recruiting class. And we're going to have to start with the obvious offensive line, man. You got to get some size, some production out of that offensive line. The biggest what if of the season for me for Alabama A&M right now was what would happen if you had any sort of blocking, any sort of help for a kill glass in crucial moments. You know, the Jackson State game, the FAMU game, and the Grambling game were really the best examples of what was missing in that front five, especially that Jackson State game. I was there in Huntsville, and Akil Glass was getting just run down. James Houston had a big game. The defensive tackles were getting pressure in the backfield right up the middle. There was no communication, no execution, and really and truly, when you look, you're losing a guy who just won the SWAC Offensive Player of the Year, was an All American. You're losing him now. You'll probably enter Quincy Casey into that starting QB role. They're going to have to protect him, man. They are going to have to give him time. They're going to have to make him feel comfortable in the pocket, because there were times last year where you could tell Aquil and what that offense was trying to do was really limited by that offensive line not really living up to the standards that you would imagine they would have. Now, the other side, the defensive line, the line of scrimmage in the trenches are really the two biggest needs for A&M. Their defensive line really lacked the ability to get up the field and get pressure. They really struggled in run defense. They just didn't have really and truly a lot of size and a lot of physicality. Those are two qualities that you're going to have to check off on this defensive line. And, they started that. I'll just say this is a position I think they've checked off a lot of their needs. Now, offensive line still needs a bit of work, but defensive line, they've addressed the size issue. They've addressed that physicality issue, and they've really got a bunch of athletes on the edge now that should solve that pass rush issue. When you look at what happened, especially in that Jackson State game, they could not get any pressure on Shedeur Sanders. He picked them apart left and right. Bishop Bonnet had a big day against them on the ground. Rashawn McKay wasn't getting pressure. There wasn't that guy you can turn to and say, I can count on him in the biggest moments to get up the field and get to the quarterback. They did not have that go-to pass rusher, and that's something they're going to have to figure out in Huntsville for next season. Now, one of their other needs, man, and a lot of people probably know this already, defensive back. They had some strong pieces added last year. They really didn't mesh as well together as a lot of people thought. You have to get I think length is the number one thing. You've got to get some long rangey guys with a bit of speed into that secondary. And this is another need I thought they've addressed pretty well as of right now. But as we all know, you've got to get all three levels of your defense gelling together, and you have to have these DBs really sync up with some chemistry, being able to communicate, knowing whose assignment, where their assignment is, who has who, and really be able to gel together throughout the season. Because there were some times this year where the secondary got picked absolutely apart. You look at the Jackson State game, you look at the Texas Southern game. I mean, there were some games this year where, I mean, they were just throwing the ball all over the field, and that cannot happen if Alabama A&M wants to reclaim their SWAC title from this spring season. So that's going to be a huge need. Length, speed, and I just think overall chemistry is really what's missing right now in the defensive backfield for Alabama A&M. Now, the last need, and this is a need that they have some talent there, but with some of the losses like DeAnderson, with some of the people that have also transferred, wide receiver is going to be a small need, really in one of those auxiliary needs that I think they can address later in the recruiting class, but they just need a bit more depth at the receiver spot. You can never have too many wide receivers, especially in an offense like Alabama A&M, where you like to spread people out. So I would say wide receiver is one of those secondary needs that they're going to have to address later on in this recruiting class. Now, Who are the top commits? Now, listen, this class is deep. I don't. This episode would be damn near an hour long if I had to break down every single commit they have. So I'm going to break down some of the guys that I think will be immediate impact, and then just kind of go over some other people they already have in this class. And we're starting with Carlos Becker III, defensive back, a former four-star cornerback, a Florida State transfer, who was a starter in the 2016 Under Armour All-American game, was a top 11 corner, the number 113 overall prospect in the 2016 class. This kid was a baller back in high school, man. Class 8A All-State first-team honors, 5 interceptions, led his high school to back-to-back runner-up finishes in 8A Florida football, 10 total interceptions in his career, and was the number 7 player when the Orlando Sentinel ranked the Super 60 in 2016 in the state of Florida. This kid has all the accolades. This kid played high-level football in high school, went to Florida State, carved out a small role, but ultimately, there was a lot of turmoil, let's just say, at Florida State over these past few years. We've seen, I believe this is the third or fourth Florida State player headed to the SWAC. Big pickup here for Alabama A&M. Should be an immediate upgrade at corner, man. His combination of size, speed, and length is something that the Bulldogs were really missing at times last season. He's going to add at least some depth, but ultimately bring a lot of competition to this DB room. I think Becker is somebody that you're going to see hit the field immediately for Alabama A&M next season. Now, another DB, Marquez Beeson, 4-star Illinois transfer, and I think this kid might be one of the more interesting transfers of the all season for Alabama A&M. A former Duncanville High School star, could make an impact on both sides of the ball as well. Like I said, former 4-star, a top 100 recruit, the number 5 athlete in the country in the 2019 class, 2019 Under Armour All-American selection, an all-star selection for the 2019 Polynesian Bowl, held offers from over 30 of the top FBS programs in the country, man. Listen, he missed his freshman season due to a preseason knee injury, started 2 games as a redshirt freshman, and this year was working on making the switch to wide receiver. He played both ways at Duncanville, gained over 1,000 total yards and 14 total touchdowns his final 2 years at Duncanville. And so I'm interested to see, is A&M going to play him both ways? Are they going to stick him at DB because he has that elite speed? He's an athlete, man. Or are they going to use him to, fit into that wide receiving room and offer some much needed depth after D. Anderson and some other people are headed out of that wide receiving room? I am interested in that. I haven't heard anything, but this kid could play both ways. He could be a special teams threat. I am very, very excited to see how Beeson fits into what Alabama A&M wants to do. Now, on the defensive line, man, Zarian Hayes, defensive end, former 3-star Appalachian State transfer out of Dillon, South Carolina, ranked as a top 150 outside linebacker out of high school, played both ways in high school. This kid's 6'1", 240, played quarterback, running back, outside linebacker, and DN, led his team to a Class 3A state title, undefeated 15-0 record during his senior year, and led the team in rushing yards in the state title game his last year, and led them to one of their first state titles in school history, man. He saw limited action in 2019, backed up multiple time All-Americans for the Sun Belt, Demetrius Taylor, who we had on the show, but missed the entire last few seasons with injury, man. Had a major injury in 2020 that kept him out the entire year. So this kid has a lot of potential. Listen, I called my guy. I know I have sources in a lot of places. Luckily, I have a very informative source up there at Appalachian State, and he said this kid is filled with potential. He got caught up in a very loaded defensive line room at Appalachian State, especially at that edge position where they've had multiple guys just really break out. And on top of that, injuries have just kind of kept his career down. So if he can stay healthy, he adds a lot of physicality and athleticism to that edge spot for Alabama A&M. But the number one thing is he going to be healthy enough to contribute for an entire year? That's the one question I have about Hayes. But ultimately, I think he's a huge addition to that defensive line group that really lacked any sort of production last season. Now, this guy is the one I know a lot of people are excited for. Daryl Middleton, he was a 3-star for 247, 4-star for ESPN, a Tennessee transfer, This kid came out of East Mississippi Community College, last chance U, was a top 5 defensive lineman in the JUCO rankings when he came out of East Mississippi. He helped that team to a 2018 undefeated season, a national title, 29 total tackles, 7 for loss, and helped lead EMCC to the number 1 scoring defense at the JUCO level, allowing less than 12 points per game. And he was a 2-year contributor for the Vols before going to West Virginia, before announcing his intention to transfer midway through the 2021 season. 43 total tackles, 3.5 tackles for loss, 2 sacks, 2 pass breakups over 2 seasons of somewhat action at Tennessee. Now, the reason his is exciting, it finally gives them an immediate inside presence with a bit of size, man. 6'7", 305 pounds, should be able to start day one at defensive tackle for the Alabama A&M Bulldogs, man. They had nobody with this type of size on that defensive line. Even if he's not a guy who's going to load the stat box, at least he's a guy you're going to have to game plan for. It will take up some space on the inside. He's a gap eater, a space eater on the inside, and that's something that Alabama A&M has not had over the past 2 seasons. Just his overall size, strength, should give Alabama A&M really a huge upgrade. He's not really a pass rusher, but their rush defense should be huge. This is a huge addition for that rushing attack or that rushing defense, and opposing teams are going to have to double team him. And a lot of the weaknesses in the SWAC come at that center guard combo in the middle of those offensive lines. This is a guy who should be able to take advantage of it. To add someone of this guy's stature was a huge addition for Alabama A&M, and I think he's somebody that should get the day one start for the Bulldogs going into next season. He's somebody you're not going to be able to miss. Now, another D lineman, Devonte Mcrae, 3-star D lineman out of North Texas, transferred in, came out of Northwestern High School, was a top 60 DN out of high school as well, committed to North Carolina State, enrolled in East Mississippi Community College as well, and was a top 10 JUCO player coming out of EMCC, committed to North Texas over Missouri, Mississippi State, Houston, some other top FBS programs. And listen, he's also going to bring some much needed size and length to the DN spot. He's a pass rusher. So this is going to be something that they really needed on the edge. And when you look at Hayes and McCrae and even Middleton from Tennessee at the middle of that defensive line, the common theme is size and athleticism. And so they are adding to that. Even if these guys don't get the immediate start, they're going to add a lot of competition and a lot of depth at a defensive line spot where Alabama A&M just did not have it this year. This kid really and truly just never really found his footing at North Texas. Like, his production really wasn't there in the stat box, but he's just a raw athlete that I think, if with the proper, instruction and coaching, that McCrae can absolutely be a factor, especially on pass rush downs and third and longs and things like that. So I think McCrae will add much needed depth to this defensive line. And I think that's the biggest thing they needed, because they really only had maybe 5-6 guys that they could rotate in and out on that D line last year. So adding depth was a huge check off for McCrae coming in this year. Then finally, Day Coleman, linebacker, 3-star, played at Arizona, transfers over from Stephen F. Austin, 3-star prospect out of Texas, was a first-team 5A Region 2 All-American selection, MVP of his senior year, was the number 110th ranked player out of the state of Texas, consensus 3-star recruit. And throughout his time at Arizona and Stephen F. Austin, he saw time at linebacker, the hybrid safety spot. That's the star, spur, whatever you want, depending on the scheme. It's one of those names, or there's a bunch of names for it, but I call it the star position, that hybrid safety spot. He can fit into a lot of different roles. 40 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, a sack, 4 pass breakups, and 5 QB hurries this season for a Stephen F. Austin team that made the FCS playoffs before falling to Incarnate Word in the first round. He's going to offer a lot of defensive flexibility for the Bulldogs. He's going to allow this defensive coordinating staff to use some unique personnel groupings, be more flexible with their play calling due to Coleman's ability to play across linebacking spots, drop back into a box safety or hybrid safety look, and his athleticism should really and truly help this team I would just say, man, be more flexible with their play calling, man. Be a little bit more creative. They're adding big time athletes, and in the middle of that defense, I think this kid is going to be one of the guys you see on the field early and often for Alabama A&M. Now, some of the other names: Thomas Douglas, three-star linebacker coming straight out of high school; Deotta Burns, DB, former Bowling Green transfer; Charles Bell from Marshall, former three-star defensive back; Eddie Watkins, another West Virginia defensive lineman; Jaron Williams, four-star Miami QB transfer; and Shakari Denson, three-star Ohio transfer. All these guys are coming into the program. They've checked off a lot of boxes, but you can tell really focusing on the D line and defensive back groupings while bringing in some QB depth after Quill heads to the NFL draft this season. So a lot of check boxes right now for Connell Maynor and this staff. A lot of great talent added. It's going to be interesting to see how they finish off this class as we approach February's National Signing Day. They're not done, but they're really working hard on the recruiting trail. So I give them a lot of credit. Now, some players to watch in the portal. Trey Palmer, former LSU wide receiver. They landed D. Anderson, so maybe D. Anderson could be a connection here. Trey Palmer would be a huge upgrade for the wide receiving core, and honestly has the talent to be wide receiver one for A&M moving forward. Also, Jadarian Boykin, Louisville edge rusher. This guy is just a pure athlete. He's got the size and speed to really bring something to Alabama A&M. I think he would be a great addition moving forward. Also, Cameron Williams, Indiana linebacker. I think Cameron Williams really fits what they need in the middle of that defense. So for me to get one of the leaders at that Mike spot, Cameron Williams is somebody in the portal I think would be huge for Alabama A&M. And then finally, DJ James, Oregon DB. He's from Alabama. He's a home state kid. I would just be pitching to him, listen, and you can come in here and immediately be the number one corner here. DJ James is a former four-star kid. He was one of the top DBs at Oregon this year in I would say, a very talented Oregon defense. So I think DJ James could come in and be DB number one for Alabama A&M immediately. So I think DJ James is somebody that Alabama A&M needs to take a real hard look at moving forward. Now, finally, man, grading this class so far, I would say just in terms of pure depth and checking off boxes of needs, I would give it an A minus. They got a lot of guys that I think could come in and challenge for a starting spot. Man, Middleton at defensive tackle, Hayes at DN, Beeson and Becker should be immediate contributors at the defensive back spot. They brought in some QB depth. The number one thing I need to see now is a little bit of wide receiving depth and some new offensive line guys. Those would be the next few check marks I would say Alabama A&M needs to add. But right now, as we sit on a December, in the late December area going into National Signing Day in February, you've got to give them an A minus for what they've brought. And I think overall, in terms of pure overall talent, it's a huge upgrade right now. And Alabama A&M understood what was missing last year. And you've got to give Maynard and this coaching staff a lot of credit for understanding that and addressing those needs early in this signing period thus far, man. But listen, that's our Alabama A&M recruiting breakdown, man. We're going to be bringing some more throughout the week, along with our bowl game coverage and along with our FCS coverage as well. So make sure to subscribe, hit the like button, and go ahead and comment what you think about Alabama A&M's class right now. Who are you most excited to see hit the field? And what else do you think they need to challenge Jackson State for the SWAC title next season, man? Let me know in the comments, man. Make sure to subscribe, hit that like button on the video before you head out. But until next time, guys, the Blue Bloods are out.